Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into how to respond when your child is bullied. And first, I have this week's parenting moment. So Curtis and I agreed long ago that we wouldn't allow our kids to play a game where there's any type of online platform, right? So we're like open to the world so we can just talk to anybody. Well, unfortunately, I think I was sick, or maybe both Curtis and I were sick, or something happened and Roblox got downloaded and I didn't know about it. So I'm not going to say that what happened on Roblox is a good thing, but I finally got my excuse to get it out of the house, and that I was thrilled about. But I also want parents to be aware of the realities and the dangers. And we've talked about this before. Any type of online platform game where you can have anybody, child predators, flock to those types of platforms, and it is very dangerous. And we did have very specific parameters in place. You do not use the chat. That was a very hard rule. The chat, you cannot chat with people, and you can't implement that. Like, there are certain ways to block the chat. That doesn't necessarily make it safe. So one of my kids was playing Roblox, and there was and this is part of the game, and they're asking, do you want to touch my butt? Is what they were flat out asking. And I'm like, and we're done. That's it. And this person was like, well, no. And they're like, are you sure? Like, they're trying to talk them into it. And I'm like, that is wildly inappropriate. And parents need to know that this kind of crap ends up on Roblox. And the problem with Roblox is anybody can create content and create games within Roblox. And it's how we've gotten, like, there was another incident several months ago where they were somehow portraying the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That is seriously problematic. So parents, don't let your kids on Roblox. Don't have the fight. And they were mad. My kids were not happy about it, but it's gone and I'm glad. And so just learn from me and don't let your kids on Roblox.
I think that's good direction.
Yeah.
Roblox has never been a safe place for kids. So
no.
Well, good job being aware and involved and knowing what's happening too.
Yeah.
And I've also made it a point to, I've been telling my kids' friends' parents too, because that's part of the problem. Oh, all of my friends play it. Well, hopefully they don't now. Hopefully their parents heeded my warning and are no longer, because I've been told, like, hey, I saw this with my own eyes. I witnessed this happen on Roblox. Please join me in kicking your kids off of Roblox.
Yeah, we all just need to pack together and say, we're not doing this, this, and this, right?
It makes parents' lives easier. Well, that was one of the things that Jonathan Haidt talked about in his book, The Anxious Generation, of, get a bunch of parents together and agree, we're not going to give our cell phones until this age, or it was something like that.
Yeah.
But like, social influence and peer pressure can be a positive thing. And this is an instance of that. So,
yeah.
Well, kudos to you too, to not peer pressure from your kids being upset and not being happy about not having it. So that's hard. Good job.
It is. But their safety's got to come first.
Yeah. And Selina and I have never really been parents who would ever give into anything like, well, all my friends play, or all my friends have, or all my friends do. We just, that one doesn't fly at our house very well. So our kids don't try it anymore.
Honestly, it usually makes me say no. It usually makes me say, well, if all your friends are doing it, maybe that means that you shouldn't be. Like,
yep.
That's a kind of a red flag.
That might strengthen my resolve to say no.
Uh-huh.
But
yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, unless it's all of my friends are going to, I don't know, all my friends are getting A's, so I should be able to get an A. Well, okay, I'm not gonna argue with that one, but anyways, I digress. On to bullying, which is a very serious topic in all seriousness. So I think it's important to acknowledge right off the bat that when your child is hurting and feeling pain, you are going to hurt and be in pain. And it's so important to acknowledge that and to be aware that you're going to have a lot of big emotions instantly when you find out somebody is hurting your child. The mama bear is going to come out, or the papa bear, right? That overprotective father. Those instincts are going to come out. And that's not a bad thing to have those protective instincts. Those protective instincts are a very positive thing, but it is also important to temper your reaction and to come at this with some sort of rationality. So tell me your guys' thoughts on that natural instinct of my kid is hurt and I have to do something now.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope most of us are that way, right? And we want to protect our kids. But sometimes when we have emotional responses rather than using our brains and thinking through how we are going to address a problem or an issue, often we make a lot of mistakes. I've been thinking about this over the last few days, actually. And we make a lot of mistakes when we are emotionally responsive. Sometimes we're wrong about the situation, and that's going to be a key that we'll probably talk about at some point throughout this podcast today. But, just because our kid says they're being bullied doesn't mean they're actually being bullied. We got to take a moment to think and respond instead of react. Now, there are situations where we want to where reaction is appropriate, immediate danger type situations, but typically school bullying has happened and there's not a continued immediate danger situation in that moment, right? It might be the next day when they go back to school or whatever. But anyway, I do appreciate you bringing up the idea of take a moment, think about what's happening, and formulate a response, formulate an action plan of how we're going to deal with whatever's happening.
We talked about this before in reacting and having fear and the way that we react when things happen. And I think it's applicable in this situation too, that we don't want to react. I guess sometimes we use this in association with like, oh, your kid did something and we need to stay calm in how we react. But I think it applies in this situation too, that when we are in check and we don't use our primitive brain to respond, then we are able to be more calm and to be able to react and not have those emotions guiding the choices we make and the things we say and do.
Yeah. And so this is a good time to establish what bullying is and what it actually isn't. So at some point in life, kids are going to do or say something that is unkind or that is intended to cause harm, either intentionally or unintentionally. It doesn't make that kid a bully. It makes that kid a growing human being who is learning social norms and boundaries and, experimenting socially. And it's just a natural part of the process. So I have a good example of this. My daughter came home from school and she's like, this one girl told me I run like a horse. And I said, okay, well, does she like horses? Maybe she likes the way you run. And come to find out that wasn't this girl's intent, but I was trying to help my daughter see, are you sure that this person has ill intent towards you? Or is she maybe just trying to pay you a compliment? Maybe she thinks you run like a horse because she thinks horses run really gracefully and they're really cool and she likes the way you run. Now, that wasn't the case, but the point is you want to differentiate, you want to distinguish, you want to help your child see that intent matters, okay? And now if a kid comes up to somebody, another kid, and just says, you're really stupid, why is that? Okay, that's rude. But again, that doesn't necessarily make that kid a bully. That just means they're making a poor choice. So bullying is consistent behavior that is intended to cause harm. That's kind of a loose.
And I would add to that there's a power differential typically as well. Yes. In like a bigger kid or a larger group of friends with this one individual that is trying to consistently agitate, irritate, pick on, be mean to, whatever words you want to use. It's a little bit different than conflict. I had a disagreement on the playground, or this kid's just simply not nice, or they're teasing me. Like they're all different things, right? And so we want to look for the bullying. The bullying is the one that can be most problematic for our children.
Right. And so I had one instance. So my oldest came home from school and I think she had like a bruise on her head or something like that. And she was telling me about some sort of a tussle she had with the kid at school. And I'm like, okay, whoa, wait a minute. And it was a boy. And I'm like, okay, what happened? And I was able to calmly reach out to the teacher and say, hey, this is what happened. I'm just looking for an explanation here. I just want to make sure that there's not an instance of something going on. And the teacher was great about it. And she's like, no, I didn't see anything. I'll keep an eye out, yada, yada, yada. Or it was something like that. Okay. So yes, there are times where like if your kid comes home and they've been physically harmed, it warrants an investigation and it warrants looking into it. But you know what? It turns out they were just playing. And that's also very normal. And it's a good thing. I honestly think that when kids are playing and someone accidentally gets hurt, that's a very much a part of the growing and learning process. Kids are learning how to interact socially. They're learning their own strengths. They're learning how people react. Those are good things that happen. Now, if your kid is just continually coming home and they're being pummeled on, you have a serious problem and you need to take action because that's not okay. But if your kid comes home and they have a bruise, I think it means your kid's being a kid.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there.
So let's say we have this instance of true bullying is going on. Now we can do an entire other episode on how to help our kids resolve conflict, peer conflict. And peer conflict resolution can be a very positive thing. It can be a good thing. It can help do all sorts of things to help teach kids self-confidence and learn positive conflict resolution. But what we're talking about is how we respond and what we do when we have an instance of genuine bullying. So when we have an instance of genuine bullying going on, the first response is oftentimes the response that matters the most. So the first thing that we need to do is listen and validate. Okay, so listening is going to be a key component. Tell me your guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah, we want to be careful because the way we respond can become really important here. If we're too harsh, we can kind of create this idea that maybe this is my fault or maybe I'm not doing enough. And this happens more than you might realize. If you think about a dad who has maybe a little boy that's being bullied or a young man that's being bullied, and dad's like, well, you got to fight back and so this is my fault. I'm doing something wrong. And so they're not going to want to talk to you and we're going to actually make the matter worse. Especially if a kid's being bullied, they're already feeling most likely some sort of inadequacy or maybe even a weakness compared to that bully, right? And so those harsh responses can be pretty hurtful. So we don't need to interrogate them. We don't need to judge them, but listen, like, oh man, that must be tough. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. Tell me more about how you responded and what you think and what you're doing. Those kinds of things are going to invite more connection. And when we have, again, like we say every week, right? When we have the connection, our children are more likely to share. They're more likely to communicate. And then we can get a better understanding of what's happening. Inside, you're going to be raging, right? Like I want to go smash somebody because they're hurting my kid. But to them, we want to be calm. We want to listen. We want to validate. And we don't want to judge. We don't want to grow the fear or anything like that.
Well, and also that we can handle what they're going to tell us, because our reaction sometimes is going to speak to them that I can't tell them that they're not going to be able to handle what I have to share with them. So our reaction, if it's calm and understanding and listening, is going to portray to them that we're able to handle the things that they are telling us.
Well, and I remember doing this to one of our kids when they were in school. They actually had a teacher that was kind of bullying them, this one child. And I just told our child, like, hey, tell them no, they can't do that. Like, they don't get to do that. And I'm not going to go into what all of that was, and I probably wasn't that calm about it. And what I learned later is that actually created more anxiety for that child. Because now, wait a minute, my dad said I got to stand up to this teacher, which isn't what needed to happen. And luckily we ended up pulling them out of that class and that was no longer a problem. They weren't in any physical danger in any way at all, but just the way things were happening it just wasn't very good. And by my reacting and having an immediate solution, and this is what you need to do, and being really direct, and and really putting a lot of pressure on them to respond in the way I thought they should respond just shot the anxiety through the roof. It was just not a great situation. Instead of, sitting down and talking with them, how do we address this? So that's why it's so important, the way we respond.
I remember having a situation and being able to, like, if I told my parents, then they were like, I'm going to go to the school and I'm going to say, and I was more terrified of what was going to happen and what was going to be said. And I was embarrassed and didn't want my parents to go to the school. So that's tricky too, because you want to take care of it and you want to fix it for them. But that also can create more fear and worry and all of those emotions for your kid too, if that's the reaction.
Yeah, sometimes even stepping in these teenager type situations, we may make things more socially difficult for a child if we just jump right in and insert ourselves into a situation. Obviously, if a child is actively being hurt in that moment, we're gonna insert and we're gonna stop it. But I think the bigger solution here is, as we communicate, as we support, as we listen, as we validate what's happening, we're also asking questions like, well, how do you think we can best resolve this? What would you like to see us do? What solutions do you have in mind? Asking them their thoughts and offering direction, like, well, what if dad or mom went to the school and had a conversation with, a teacher, or ask them how they feel about it. Because that way we can kind of draw out where their fears are and what they're concerned about, because that way they have a say in what's happening and we're not just freaking out and responding as parents.
And there can be a delicate balance too. I mean, because I think sometimes in instances of bullying, the kid might be able to resolve it on their own. They might be able to just stand up to them and say, I'm not okay with this behavior and I want you to stop. And sometimes kids just lack that confidence. However, if you find out that your kid is repeatedly being threatened physically, then by another kid, then yes, you need to step in and take action regardless. If there's threats of physical bodily harm, or if there is bodily harm happening, that warrants immediate action. But I would say those cases of bullying are usually a little bit more rare compared to, it's more of a social thing. Maybe they're just like, if it's a power dynamic and it's a bigger kid and they're just harassing this kid, or they're just saying mean things and the kid's afraid to stand up to him because this kid is bigger. Or if, again, it's a group, like Jeremiah mentioned earlier, like, maybe your kid is on the outs with their friends and this friend group has just turned on them for some reason. That can be incredibly emotionally painful and difficult. And, I think if wherever possible, I think it is a great idea to let kids handle bullying themselves, because it's going to give them confidence to be able to handle these types of situations. But that's not always possible. And sometimes if it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and you've done everything you can think of to help your kid, I think there is a point where parents do need to step in. They do need to contact the school, or they do need to take additional steps, because repeated bullying that just goes on and on and on, that can be detrimental to a teen or a kid's mental health, and it can create a lot of problems. But I do like this idea of initially talking to the kid and saying, well, what steps do you think you can take to do this? Or maybe just helping them gain the confidence to be able to stand up to the bully, or to be able to try to resolve the situation on their own before the parents step in.
Yeah, and it is always better for the kid to resolve it on their own. If mom and dad step in, then they can get bullied because, oh, you got to have your mommy come take care of you, or your daddy, whatever. Those kinds of things happen. And, we might get a little bit of hate from some of my opinions on bullying, because my opinions are a little bit different than what we teach and what schools do. But if we think about a popular Christmas movie from when I was a kid, we got a group of young boys who are being bullied by other neighborhood bullies, and they're picked on quite often until one of them finally just loses it and he beats the snot out of this kid. But guess what? Never happened anymore.
Yeah.
He was never bullied again because he stood up to him. And sometimes that's what it takes. And it's so scary for our kids. And I get it. And sometimes it's not a reality, right? It's not possible to do that. And so there's going to come times when schools have to be involved and parents have to be involved and things have to happen to keep them safe. But I do agree with you, Liz, in that we want the kids to try and resolve it on their own. And let me make it really clear. Like, I'm not advocating for fighting. I think there's almost always a better way. But what I am advocating for is that sometimes we got to stand up against somebody who's being mean or being a bully. And what that looks like is going to be between you and your kid and within your family, and how to approach that. I just worry a little bit that some of our programs that exist in our school systems, if we look at the history of bullying in schools, when I was a kid, you didn't hear much about it, but now we hear about it all the time. We're an anti-bullying school, and I'm calling BS. I see more bullying going on now than ever in the history of my life. And I think it's because the policies and the way we do it is wrong. It's failing miserably. And so this is something you got to come up with as a family, moms and dads together with their children, to kind of figure out how to attack these kinds of things. Because, gosh, I can't imagine how miserable that must be for some kids to go through that day after day of being bullied and picked on. And it's just not right.
So I'll take a little spin off of that. And I'd say take time to help your children to build confidence. And I don't mean that in like I'm better than other people, but being okay with who you are and being confident in who you are. So I feel like you can combat some of the bullying or the teasing and the things that happen when it's just like, okay, that's great. You feel that way about me or something like that, because you don't let other people and their opinions matter to you more than what you think about yourself. So helping build your kids and their confidence in themselves, loving who they are and who they want to become, and worrying about that and putting their value on that more than what other people are saying and doing to them.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, Selina. We had a few years ago, our oldest boy wanted to dress up in Star Wars stuff for May the 4th in high school. And he's all dressed up. And I remember thinking, oh man, I was a nerd when I was a kid, and we would have made fun of you for that. I'm like, this kid's going to get eaten alive at school. But it was quite the opposite. Actually, it went very well for him. And I think a lot of that came with his confidence in who he was. He didn't really care what anybody else thought. And really, it ended up where I think by the end of the day, he was autographing things for people and taking pictures, and his other peers really enjoyed what he had done that day. And it was a lot of fun for him. And I think he continued to do it for a few years beyond that. And so that confidence does create a lot of breakdown, because the words just don't matter so much to someone who has confidence in who they are.
And kids naturally tend to scorn or push away from things that they don't understand. So, if a kid likes something that's different, or maybe that's just not typical, other kids are just naturally going to look at that and say, well, that's weird. But if your child can approach that with confidence and say, oh, I'm sorry you think it's weird, I like it, so, and not worry about it, then kids are less likely to continue teasing or continue like the bullying, or they're less likely for it to turn into bullying. And so, yeah, I love this idea of, if you like something, be proud about it. And it's okay if nobody else likes it. You like it. And, maybe even go further of, what value do you find in this? What value does this, whatever interest, have to you? And, maybe other people don't see that value, but don't forget what value it holds for you. And that's what matters most.
Nobody else can hurt your feelings. You get to decide. So it's what you make it mean when somebody says something. It's your thoughts about that. So I like to teach that nobody else can hurt your feelings. You get to decide that. So when those things are happening to you, you get to decide how you're going to respond and how you're going to let that affect you.
All right. So I do want to discuss some signs of bullying impacting mental health, because this can and does happen. So if your kid all of a sudden starts withdrawing, or they have a lot of anxiety, mood changes, or if maybe they're avoiding school, then we have a problem going on. And that is when it is appropriate to step in. You can either seek counsel from the school to the district, guidance counselors, school resources, whatever it may be. But, again, when it is having a significant impact on their mental health or on their education, their ability to receive an education, then yes, you do need to step in. And even if your child hates on you for it, even if they say, how could you do that? You're just making it worse. And it's okay that they feel that way, but ultimately you have a responsibility to protect your child in a way they may not agree with.
And I realized me, saying, oh, it's your thoughts. You don't have to let other people affect you. That's every day. That's
right.
Normal everyday things, and just helping build that. I realize that there's extreme cases and there's situations that really affect people. And I would want to be sensitive to that. And so I appreciate having it brought up that we do need to seek help. We need to seek that support that is needed when those situations arise for our kids.
Yeah, we want to closely monitor, especially if we're aware, if we're not getting involved in working with our child and allowing them to manage what's happening for them. We do want to monitor that. We want to stay involved. And you're right, there are times we're going to have to get involved in ways our children may not like. And that's fine. That's okay. But we're going to communicate with them and help them understand what's happening and what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's the right decision. As long as we're not reacting, as long as we're acting, we're making logical decisions and choices to help them through this. We don't want to see this go on. We don't want to see it affecting mental health. We don't want to see it affecting their ability to complete school or their friendships. We want to address these things as quickly as possible and help them get through those hard times and find resolutions fairly quickly. But we just want to do it with some smarts and making good decisions. And of course, sometimes we do have to involve the school, and sometimes we may even have to involve law enforcement or something of that nature to protect them. It's a crazy world out there. It's just full of crazy stuff and crazy people. And so that's the job we have as parents, to be involved and to help and to direct that, to keep the little human beings safe.
And to keep them developing naturally. So there was a kid in my school district who unfortunately committed suicide. He was in like 5th or 6th grade, maybe even 4th grade. He was way too young. And that is the last thing that we want. And it was a result of bullying, and it came out, and the school ended up getting involved, and there's litigation against the school. We don't want it to go that far, okay? Because that's the absolute worst outcome that you can think of. And, there are steps that we want to take and we need to take to prevent it from going that far, because the reality is sometimes kids will hide this from their parents. And so that's another reason why we've talked about time and time again is you need to be paying attention to what's going on with your kid, their changes in behavior, because maybe there's been ongoing bullying and they haven't told you about it. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your relationship with your kid, or that you're failing as a parent, or that you're doing something wrong because they didn't come to you. It just means that sometimes kids think they can handle it on their own, or they're afraid to go to you because they're afraid of looking weak on their part, or they're afraid of what other people are going to think. So, again, as parents, we're going to do what it takes to keep our kids safe. And it may not always be the popular thing, and it's often not going to be the popular thing with our kid. But, well, I feel like that's such a big part of parenting, is doing what's not popular with our kids, because that's
sometimes
the job.
Yeah.
Okay. Final thoughts.
Being a parent can be tough.
Yep.
And it's hard when our kids are hurting. And, just taking the time to communicate with them, paying attention to those signs, withdrawn, sadness, disengagement from hobbies and activities, disengagement with friends that they used to hang out with, an increased desire to not go to school. A lot of kids don't want to go to school anyway, but if it gets worse, those are some things that we can look for and pay attention for, and look for opportunities to connect with your child in a way that breeds connection and openness, so that they're willing to talk. And then take some time, make some decisions, and use some logic in how to address whatever situation you're dealing with.
I think these are good opportunities to build that connection and to help your kids in the process of learning and growing. These are normal things that happen in the process of growing up and having relationships with other human beings. We're all imperfect people trying to learn and figure it out. And so helping build those skills for your kids to be there to coach them and help them along, not try to just make it go away and fix it for them.
Yeah. Instilling confidence to handle conflict, because it's going to happen again. And they're most certainly going to encounter, well, I would say even adults can encounter bullying, and adults can certainly encounter other adults who they could either be a peer, or they could be maybe a boss or somebody who is in a position of power, could bully them or just be unfair or unjust. And so it's great to help kids learn confidence to be able to stand up in those instances or to resolve conflict. So my final thought with this is find your own person to process this with. So you're going to have your own feelings, and that's totally normal. I think it's important for parents to be able to process this. Maybe it's with a spouse, or it's with a close friend, or it's with your own parent, but just find another adult to just say, oh my goodness, someone's hurting my kid and I just feel so angry about it and I just want to go and just rip this kid a new one. Say those things out loud to somebody, not your kid, hopefully. But, process your own emotions when you're dealing with something so incredibly difficult like your child in pain, because that's hard as a parent, and it's important for you to process those emotions as well. Okay, so next week we are going to continue this, but we are going to talk about how to deal with it when your child is being the bully. So we will see you all next week. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.